Okay guys, so now we want to be able to click on one of these and have the info show below. So this is going to be a little tricky because we need to add an event listener on each one of these, and we need to get the meal ID. So if we open up our console here and we take a look at one of these, you'll see that there's a class of meal info, and then there's a class, or not a class, but an attribute of data meal ID. And we need to bring that in so that we can make a request to get that specific meal. Okay, so let's start on that. So I'm going to go down here to the event listeners, and what we'll do is we'll take our meals element, which is basically the container of each meal, and we'll add an event listener onto that. And it's going to be a click, and then we're going to put an arrow function here, and we want to find out if the meal info div belongs to the element that we click. So we're going to create a variable here called meal info, and we're going to set that to our event parameter, and then we can use .path.find. So basically it'll go through all the child elements or items. So we'll call this item, and then let's just console log so I can show you what this gives us. So if I search for steak and I click, you can see all these elements that we get. So we need to narrow it down to basically the meal info. Whatever element has the class of meal info, we want to return. So inside here, we're going to first of all check to see if there's a class. So we'll say if the item dot class list, which will return false if there's no classes. Then we want to return the item dot class list that contains, okay, remember we have this contains method, if it contains meal info. Okay, else then we're just going to return false and nothing's going to happen. So now let's go under meal info and console log that. Oops. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so if I click on one of these, it gives us the element with meal info and the ID. Okay, so now we can get this ID right here. Actually, it should be uppercase ID. So up here, well, I guess it just converts it to lowercase. Okay, that's fine. Let's set a variable here. Actually, let's first check for meal info. So if meal info, then let's create a variable called meal ID and set that to meal info, and then we can use the get attribute method. Oops. Get attribute, and we want to get the attribute of data dash meal ID. All right, and let's see if that works. So we'll console log meal ID. So now if I search and I click on one, okay, that's the ID for that, that's the ID for that. Good, it's exactly what I want. Now we're going to pass this into a function called get meal by ID. Just yeah, we'll do that. So get meal by ID, which is going to do just that. So we'll go up top here. We'll go after the search, but above the event listeners. So fetch meal by ID function get meal by ID, and that's going to take in a meal ID. Actually, I think that looks better. So get meal by ID, and let's see, how do we want to do this here? We're going to make a fetch request again. Now the endpoint that we want, if we look at the documentation, is right here. Look up full meal details by ID. So we just want to grab this and put that in here, except we want this to be dynamic. So we want to replace that with the mail ID. Okay, and remember, fetch will give us a promise that returns a response. So we want that response to be JSON, and then that will give us a promise, and we get our data. And then all I'm going to do is create a variable called meal. And actually, I'll show you what this gives us. So console log data. So this should happen when I click. So I'll search for steak, and I'll click on one, and we get meals, which is an array. Even though it's just a single meal, it's still inside of an array. Okay, so you have to, again, you have to go by what the API gives you. So let's set a variable called meal and set it to data.meals. And remember, it's an array, so we want the first value. So we want 0. Okay, and then I'm going to have another function to actually add it to the DOM. We'll call this add meal to DOM, and we'll pass in that meal. Okay, so now let's go down here and let's say function add meal to DOM, and that's going to take in meal. Okay. Now this is where the part with the ingredients is kind of crazy. So if we look at how it's formatted, I really don't like how they did this, but we have string ingredient 1 canola oil, right? And then down here we have string measurement, or string measure 1 2 tablespoons. So the first ingredient is 2 tablespoons of canola oil. The second is going to be 4, and if we look up here at ingredient 2 is beef fillet, so 4 beef fillet. The third is going to be, so that's beef stock, so measure 3 is, so this would be 1.5 cup beef stock. So we have to do a little bit of magic in our JavaScript to get this formatted the way we want. It would be much better if they just returned an array of the amount or the measure and then the ingredient. So basically that's what we want to create, is an array with the measurement and the ingredient from this absolute chaos. I don't know why they did that. I'm sure there's a good reason, but it just makes it harder for us to work with. So let's create an array here called ingredients. Okay, so we'll just initialize an array, and then what we'll do is a for loop, and we're going to say let I equals 1, and as long as I is less than or equal to 20, because there's a max of 20 ingredients, then we want to increment by 1. Okay, so we want to go ahead and do an if statement here. Let's say if else. So we want to check to see if there's an ingredient. So meal, now instead of doing the dot syntax like string ingredient, we can't do that because we're using a variable in here, so we need to use the bracket syntax. And we're going to put in some backticks and say str ingredient, and then the number, which is going to be whatever that I value is in this current iteration. So we're going to check for that to see if there's an actual ingredient. If there is, we're going to take our ingredients array and we're going to push onto it. And this is going to be really weird because we want to have the ingredient and the measurement in here, like the ingredient dash measurement. So let's put in our variable syntax and then meal, and we want str ingredient and then whatever that I variable is. Wait a minute, actually I'm sorry, this should be inside these brackets, we need backticks like this. Okay, now outside of this expression here, I'm just going to put a dash, and then we're going to do the same thing for the measurement. So it'll be meal brackets, and then our backticks in str measure, and then whatever the number, the current iteration. Okay, so string ingredient 1, we'll go with string measure 1, string ingredient 2, we'll go with string measure 2, and we'll have an array of that. Else, if the string ingredient isn't found, because some of them, if we look, you can see it doesn't fill all 20. So that's where we're checking to see, to make sure that there is an actual ingredient. If there's not, then we're going to break out of the for loop. Okay, so we just want to break. I know that is a little confusing, but that's kind of what we have to do in order to work with how this API is formatted. So now we want to output our HTML. We're going to output the single meal. Yeah, so let's go under the for loop, still within the add meal to DOM, and let's say single underscore meal element, and set the inner HTML, and set that to some backticks. And inside here, we're going to have a div with the class of single meal. Okay, and we'll have an h1, and inside the h1 we want the title, which is going to be meal.str meal. Actually, we can probably save this and check it out. So if we search for steak and click on one, and there we go, we get the H1 because that's all we've output right out to this point. So let's go ahead and do the rest here. So underneath the H1, we're going to have an image. Keep forgetting I can't use Emmet. So we'll have an image, and we want the source, and the source is going to be the thumbnail. So mail.string mail thumb. All right, and the alt, we'll set that to the title, which is str mail. And then under the image, we're going to have a class div class equals, let's say, single meal info. And in here, we're going to have the category. So we can put meal dot, and then it's going to be str category. Actually, this is going to, yeah, it's going to be a paragraph, but we need to check for the category. So what we're doing here is a ternary operator. So if there's a category, then we're going to output a paragraph with the category. Str category paragraph. Okay, else, then we're going to just output an empty string. All right, and then we'll do the same thing for the area, because there's an area property. So we want to check for that first, because some don't have it. Otherwise, we're going to run into some issues. Okay, so that's the info, which is the category in the area. Now, underneath that, I'm going to have a div with the class of main. Okay, and then inside here, we're going to have a paragraph. And this is going to be the instructions. So let's say meal.str instructions, which is like the description or the recipe, whatever you want to call it. And then let's put an H2 underneath with ingredients. And this is going to be a UL, unordered list. And remember we have that ingredients array that we created above, so we're going to say ingredients, and we're going to map through ingredients.map and say for each ingredient we want to output a list item with the ingredient. And if we want to output this as a string, we have to just add .join onto the end. All right, let's save that, see what that does. Okay, we'll click one of these so we get the image. we get the info here, we get this, the instructions, and we get the ingredients. And you can see the ingredients is an array of the actual ingredient name and the measurement. Okay, we created this array to be able to loop through and show this stuff. So we're kind of running out of time here, so I think in the next video we'll go ahead and style this. And then we're also going to add the random functionality. So I'll see you in the next vid.